Without digital IDs, the CBDC digital finance system cannot exist. One of the reasons it can't exist without that is because of the KYC functionality built into this digital financial system. They have the know your customer protocols. They have to know who you are. And so they want to have your wallet tied to a digital ID and have that digital ID be mapped to your physical ID through the biometric. Identity gap is the claim that the lack of digital ID is preventing people, mainly the world's poor, from accessing essential services, whether it's banking, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare. They claim the only way for these people to be able to access these services is to onboard them to these identity schemes.
In today's video, Whitney Webb is talking about digital IDs. The perfect example of it is biometric like fingerprints, face IDs, and eyeballs. According to Whitney Webb, without these digital IDs, the CBDC cannot exist. That in recent years, central banks in several major countries, including Russia and the United States, have been exploring the creation of digital assets, commonly known as central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. Russian policy discussions about the creation of a digital ruble center on its potential utility for facilitating international trade and mitigating the impact of sanctions. The advantages for Russia of CBDCs, including enhanced cross-border payment capabilities and reduced transaction costs, are fairly straightforward. They could provide Russia with alternatives to traditional payment systems like SWIFT that it lost access to as a result of Western economic sanctions introduced in the wake of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in early 2022. The digital ruble project, initiated by the Russian Central Bank in 2020, has progressed rapidly, with real-world testing involving several commercial banks and clients now underway. Positioned as a retail CBDC, the digital ruble is intended to integrate seamlessly into everyday transactions. However, several important challenges persist, ranging from public skepticism towards CBDCs and concerns over state surveillance to integration costs for banks and the difficulties of aligning the digital ruble with international CBDC standards. More broadly, Russia's CBDC efforts face competition from countries like China, which has made more progress in testing a CBDC and its associated infrastructure. China has also made more strides in fostering international collaboration. That state of affairs may ultimately increase Russia's overall dependence on China. Meanwhile, Russia is trying to galvanize efforts within the BRICS group of countries to promote CBDC usage and alternative ways of making cross-border payments. The potential success of Russia and China in this field does not pose an immediate threat to either the dominance of the US dollar or the viability of the existing Western sanctions regime. But it does pave the way for gradual, yet significant changes to the global financial system as we know it. Let's watch the Whitney Webb interview. But before I am humbly requesting you do subscribe my channel and turn on notification for more updates.
There's a coordinated global policy push for digital IDs as the new form of government-issued identification credentials. And they're essentially all based on your biometric data, which can be your fingerprints, your face, the iris of your eyeball. And the idea is essentially to collect all of that data and have it housed or have it tied directly to your digital ID. So your physical ID will be mapped to the digital ID. Digital IDs are not really a separate project from CBDCs and this new digital financial system. And UN documentation and also documentation from the Bank of International Settlements, they very overtly state that CBDCs and digital IDs are meant to go together. And without digital IDs, the CBDC digital finance system cannot exist. One of the reasons it can't exist without that is because of the KYC functionality built into this digital financial system. They have the know your customer protocols. They have to know who you are. And so they want to have your wallet tied to a digital ID and have that digital ID be mapped to your physical ID through the biometric data collection. So there's different efforts to make digital IDs either as NFTs, non-fungible tokens. There's also the efforts of Sam Altman of OpenAI and his WorldCoin project, whereby you scan your iris, you give them the biometric credentials of your eyeball. They give you a unique identifier, a digital ID, and it's inherently tied to a digital wallet. That is the same model the UN is using. They've already implemented it for refugees getting food assistance from the World Food Program. It's called Building Blocks. It's on blockchain. It involves refugees scanning their irises, and in order to buy food or receive their rations, they have to check out of a grocery store style place in the refugee camp, and they check out biometrically with an eyeball scan. And then the amount of food they have, the monetary value of that is subtracted from their digital wallet connected to their digital ID and their iris. It doesn't matter what country you're in or whether you're part of BRICS or part of the collective West. This is being rolled out across the board. One of the main reasons for this coordinated global push to develop digital IDs is because it's deemed essential to the entire Sustainable Development Agenda, which is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, also known as Agenda 2030. And the specific part dealing with digital IDs is within SDG 16, which is about building peaceful and inclusive societies. One of the indicators of SDG 16, 16.9, calls for legal identification for everyone in the world from the time they're born, essentially. The leading alliance that was launched under the auspices of the UN to accomplish that is known as ID 2020 and has since been folded into what is called the Digital Impact Alliance, which essentially has the same funders and founders as ID 2020.
Digital IDs is a project of CBDC. Without these IDs, the CBDC cannot exist. During Corona vaccine, the system allowed to make vaccination passports for every people. Western banks swiftly severed ties with Russian entities almost immediately after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Following the release of a U.S. executive order in December 2023 that created a framework for imposing secondary sanctions on facilitators of transactions linked to the Russian defense sector, 2 banks in China and parts of the Middle East reduced their exposure to Russian counterparties. This intensified pressure has left Russian companies grappling with heightened transactional challenges. Russian financial authorities are trying to devise solutions to a tricky problem that is intertwined with the intricacies of international settlements and payments. For many Russian companies, international payments are hindered by sanctions. Additionally, foreign banks often choose to refuse transactions or close accounts for Russian firms, avoiding the costly burden of compliance. The Kremlin and the central bank are discussing a range of possible options with the Russian private and financial sector. Now, they have already granted businesses the flexibility to use various options, including digital assets and cryptocurrencies for overseas activities.
Identity gap is the claim that the lack of digital ID is preventing people, mainly the world's poor, from accessing essential services, whether it's banking, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare. They claim the only way for these people to be able to access these services is to onboard them to these identity schemes. So what they mean by essential services is, they say without these forms of recognized identity, people in the world, mainly the world's poor, are unable to access bank accounts, unable to access healthcare, unable to access government services, a variety of things, because they don't have ID or they don't have bank accounts, things of that nature. So in order to allow everyone to access all of these things and include them, hence the frequent word of inclusion in all these documents, they say digital ID is the necessary way to bridge this identity gap. One of the main words they use to market this stuff is equity and inclusion, the idea that we need to include everybody in these new systems. But if you don't participate in digital ID, you won't have a legally recognized identity, you won't have rights, you won't be able to access services without it. So it's being framed as promoting inclusion, but the system itself is inherently exclusionary and has been used to track and surveil people, to link people to, essentially all their activities, what they say online in some of the countries that have rolled this out, and has been used to facilitate human rights abuses. So it's not exactly as inclusive as they like to claim. It's inclusive in the sense that we want everyone equally included in our new system that we're creating, our new control system, fundamentally. The UN likes to talk about human rights and how this is ultimately a human rights project and things like that, or how it's empowering human rights. But in other documents of the UN, they refer to human rights not as inalienable rights, which is what most people think of when they hear the term human rights. In some of these UN documents, they refer to human rights explicitly as policy tools, or tools that can be used to basically implement, specific things and mechanisms that ultimately give, greater control over really any aspect of your life that they may want to influence.
If we don't participate in digital IDs, you won't be able to access services without it. What are your thoughts about it? Share your thoughts in comment section below. Ensure you like the video. If you like it, do subscribe my channel and turn on notification for more updates. And I am humbly requesting you to support my channel. Your support and love is my actual income. Thanks for watching.